Hello, BookTube. As you may know, I am vacationing up in Vermont at the house of Mark Richardson of Richardson Reads, a fellow booktuber. And thanks to his generosity, today we went to one of the meccas, one of the holy sites of book shopping in the United States, the Book Barn in Niantic, Connecticut. It's on the Connecticut shore, and it is a complex of buildings full of books. It's an amazing place. It's actually three places. There's a main nucleus of buildings with a petting zoo and little leafy pathways everywhere and several dedicated buildings. And then there are a couple of spin-off shops elsewhere in the little town of Niantic that are relatively nearby, so that the genre spillover of romance or children's or science fiction or whatnot could go there instead of filling up the main bookstores. Mark and I were looking at a map, we were looking at time estimates, and realized that it was doable, that it is a doable trip from small town Vermont. So we did it on the hottest day of the year. In fact, as some weather forecasters were saying early this morning when we set out, the hottest day on record for this day of the year in some parts of the Northeast. We brought my dog, Frida Bean. We called ahead of time, and the Book Barn said they were perfectly amenable to dogs as long as the dogs are well behaved. Frida is well behaved and extremely friendly to humans. She doesn't like quite the cut of the look of other dogs. She's not aggressive with them, but they're not tucking in their shirt tails over her, and that makes her bossy with them. But with humans, she's an absolute wind-up toy. And she's good in the car. So we went. We left early in the morning, first thing, timed in order to get there as they were opening and flourishing for business, and that is exactly what happened. A beautiful, beautiful day, hot and humid. I think probably in that car, and also of all the people gathered at the Book Barn today, I was the only person who was wonderfully, wonderfully comfortable the whole time. And Frida was well behaved the whole time. It was just amazing. It could not have worked any better. The Book Barn is extremely reasonably priced. The paperbacks are all $1. The hardcovers are seldom more than $4. And there's a whole building and a half of dollar books, and all of hardcover and oversized dollar books, and also whole buildings dedicated to specific genres. Which means that it's very easy to fill up a tote bag or two or three or an entire back seat of a car or entire trunk of a car. And that's just what happened. So this video is not just a book haul. It is the most epic book haul in the history of this channel. I just thought I'd prepare you for that. I don't know how long it's going to be, but we're going to start off right away. We'll start off with the mass market paperbacks. I got quite a few mass market paperbacks today. I've often mentioned on this channel that I'm gradually falling out of love with the format. The binding tends to be restrictive. The font size tends to be a little bit on the eye strainy side, but I haven't ruled it out. I'm not being doctrinaire about it, and also quite a bit of what appeared in cheap and nicely done mass market paperbacks will never appear in any other format. So since the mass market paperbacks were all over the place at the Book Barn and were also $1 a piece, I loaded up on them, even if they were duplicates, even if I knew they were duplicates, because I am, keep in mind, filling a bookcase here that I won't be bringing back to Boston. That'll just be an ancillary library. So the first one is, we'll do some, well, I don't remember how I have these organized, but I think the science fiction is all together. The first one is a historical novel that some of you will remember more for a TV miniseries than for the book itself. The book itself came out called The Antagonists, but then it was renamed Masada when it was made into a miniseries. This is by Ernest Gahn, who wrote Fate is the Hunter, a book that any of you amateur pilots will know by memory. And this is the story of that is taken from a small bit of Josephus. A small band of Jewish zealots, led by a man named Eleazar ben Yair, hole themselves up in King Herod the Great's old fortress at the top of Masada. It had, well, first of all, it was unapproachable on tactical grounds. It also had vast storehouses of food and fresh water. It was possible for a very small force to hold off a very large force up there for a long time, and it turns out that's exactly what happened because the Roman legions were sent to reduce it. You can't have an armed enemy stronghold in your territory. The Roman legion was commanded by a name named Flavio Silva. And in the TV miniseries, the TV miniseries is actually quite good. Elazar Ben Yair is played by Peter Strauss, and Flavio Silva is played by Peter O'Toole. Really good performance by Peter O'Toole. Really good adaptation of this book into a screenplay. Also very noticeable in the miniseries is David Warner as a simpering and yet completely evil, conniving, dangerous Roman politician, and the great Anthony Quayle as Rubrius Gallus, the engineer who is faced with the task of taking Masada. The book is a lot more textured than the TV series. This would still be a case in which I say that the video adaptation of the work is better than the original, but the original has a lot of heft to it. It's one of my favorite Roman historical novels, and surely one or two Roman historical starter kits are on your way. This will be on that list, and I don't have it. I don't have it at all. And when I saw it, I realized, do I really want to wait until I get a heavy, musty, ugly hardcover of a book called The Antagonists when I can get this? I love the miniseries. I love everything that Peter O'Toole did. And this has a little still from that miniseries. Wouldn't I rather have this? I would. So I did. I'm just going to scatter these because there's no way that anyone human could do a Steve Perryman. Then this little thing, for some reason, Mark kept putting this in my hand. Not sure what he was trying to imply there. I'll figure it out. Then this next one, I have mentioned that I consider any trip to a used bookstore now that doesn't include Tudor historical fiction to be a failure. I am reading Wolf Hall very slowly and very attentively and loving it, and it is reigniting all of my interest in Tudor historical fiction. And I found one, a piece of it, today. It's not any piece of Tudor historical fiction that would, I think, ever be on anyone's best of list, and I've never read it. It's a romance novel, by the look of it. I've never actually even heard of it. It's by Anne Merton Abbey, and it's called Catherine in the Court of Six Queens, with this incredible cover art. And this is not that Catherine, and it's not that Catherine, and it's also not that Catherine. It's not any of the Catherines that Henry VIII married. I believe it's just someone else. So what's her name? Catherine Chase. So, well, I mean, I will gladly read it. I'll gladly read it. Who knows how much research went into it? And it was technically historical fiction. Then the next one is murder mystery. It's Scandinoir. Scandinoir really does not appeal to me. The more I try it, the less I like it, with only a few exceptions. It's full of middle-aged, sad sack, and openly incompetent police officers bumbling their way into solving something and acting tough the whole time. It really doesn't do anything for me. Something is lost in translation, maybe even literally in translation. But these two, I have no idea how to say their name, the authors of The Laughing Policeman, these two, the Martin Beck series is, I think, the founding series of Scandinoir, and is certainly one of the most popular. I found one with this great cover, The Abominable Man. It's these two. No idea how to say those names, but I'll try it. I read The Laughing Policeman in exactly this. This is Bantam. This is an old Bantam. And I read The Laughing Policeman in exactly this edition and thought, this is a joke, right? This has got to be a joke. But no. So I'll give it a try. Maybe it hits its stride later in the series. Then I found a couple of sprawling, romancy type novels of a bygone era and a bygone author. I've mentioned for maybe Midrash, the fiction that I was reading was I, Judas by Taylor Caldwell and Jesse Stern. And I mentioned, I think at the time, that Taylor Caldwell had a massive career on her own as one of the best-selling authors of her era. And it was for big, sumptuous novels like this. She's best known now for The Captains and the Kings, or Answer as a Man, or even Great Lion of God. But these things were her bread and butter, and I've never seen them before. I never see them at all. And I found two mass markets, one in much better condition than the other. This is A Prologue to Love, about an industrialist family and the women who ruled it. And then this next one, I almost turned it down because there's so much missing from the cover. This is The Final Four. And you see, we've taken a beating on the cover here, but you see all these covers reference The Captains and the Kings as her main claim to fame. I don't think I've ever read The Final Four. I've read A Prologue to Love, but it was a long time ago. So I'll gladly give it a try again. Everything that I've liked, everything I've read by Taylor Caldwell I've liked. the thing I like most of all, perhaps predictably enough, given my preference for the New Testament, is Dear and Glorious Physician, her novel about St. Luke. And I looked for it today with its classic old mass market cover and didn't find it. But I found plenty. So then I think the next vein we're hitting here is romance. There was half of one whole building devoted to romance. There's so many romances that they were broken down by type and category within the genre. And naturally, I looked for Signet Regency romances, the old-fashioned Signet Regency romances that I love so much. In fact, I even asked someone if there were any. I noticed right away at a glance at a mile of bookshelves that there weren't any at all, not even one. And that's usually a conscious buying decision. And it turns out, yes, that is the case. It was a conscious buying decision. So they don't have any. They didn't have any of those. And it was 98 degrees in Niantic this afternoon. Not the wonderful boy band featuring Jeff Timmons, but the temperature in Fahrenheit. It was 98 degrees Fahrenheit. And these stores were lightly air conditioned, but not heavily air conditioned. So I was a little distracted making sure that Frida wasn't overheating, making sure that she was at least relatively okay. And there were literally millions of things to look at. So with the romances, I mainly got just cover buys. And we'll see. That has often not led me astray in romances. The first one is a Highlander romance. This is Gail Callan. I know this author. I'm not sure that I have this book. I don't think that I do. It's called Love with a Scottish Outlaw. And Highlander romances are probably, of the prevalent categories, they're probably my least favorite that's going right now, and maybe I could aim to change that. Then this next one is a pirate novel. This is by Sandra Hill, who I've read many times and liked, but I don't think I've ever read this one. This is The Pirate Bride. No idea which one of them is the Pirate Bride, but I'm eager to find out. Then we have Anna Harrington. I don't know if I have this book, but of course, a Paul Marin cover is an auto-buy. And this is An Inconvenient Duke by Anna Harrington. And that is our boy, Paul Marin. No mistaking those cheekbones anywhere. And this, I think there's one other Paul Marin romance in here. Oh, no, there isn't. There is more Paul Marin covers, but they're not romances. We'll get to that. This next one is also by Anna Harrington. This is An Unexpected Earl, probably in the same series. But I noticed this one stuck out to me because of its size. It is wider by just a bit than an ordinary mass market. No idea what explains that. I'm not familiar with this at all. Maybe at one point in its life, this was a reader's advance copy for some reviewer. But I'll definitely take it. It's Regency, that's all I need. And then the last romance that we have is a category that Sarah at the Bookish Knitter turned me on to, and that is contemporary cowboy romances. And this is, these are two of the best of them. I think this is a dual novel. It's Linda Lale Miller and the great Maisie Yates. And this is Cowboy Ever After, 2 books for the price of 1. Big, fat, thick thing like that. That has Big Sky Mountain by Linda Lale Miller and Bad News Cowboy by Maisie Yates. I'll definitely take them, either one. I don't quite go all gooey in the knees the way Sarah does about modern cowboy romances, but maybe I'm getting there. Then, what's the next category here? Okay, we'll move on to less genre stuff and more mainstream fiction. And we'll start with one of my favorite authors. Only 2 books before he sold out to Hollywood. But the 2 books are great. I cannot recommend them strongly enough. The author is Jeremy Levin, who you may have heard me praise for a novel called Creator, about a man named Harry Walter and his fictional creation, Boris Lafkin. Or is it the other way around? One way or another, Creator, as the title implies, is very much an allegory about God. And Jeremy Levin wrote another book, this one, Satan, His Psychotherapy and Cure, by the unfortunate Dr. Casper JSPS, which stands for Just Some Poor Schmuck. And in this book, Satan submits to psychotherapy to see where it will get him, and more importantly, where it will get the world. And this is a weird book. It is full of long, arching, evil plans by a whole bunch of characters, that some of which come to horrific fruition, some which don't. I think one of the points of this book, if a novel this is just brimming with genius. If a novel this big and this antic can be said to have a point at all, One of the points here, I think, is that Satan is a piker compared to the evil that humans do to each other. One way or another, haven't read it in a long time, never see it. It's never going to be in trade paperbacks, never going to be reprinted in any way. And so when I see a mass market of either Creator or Satan, I grab them both because they do fall apart. Then this next one, a big fat thing. This is, what is this? A Coronet Paperback. So all the way from the UK. This is God is an Englishman. Deltafield is a bit of an acquired taste. I absolutely love him. I looked for him today to see if maybe maybe the book barn had a dozen Deltafield mass market paperbacks. I would have taken them all. But as far as I could see, this was the only one. And this is just a big, he specialized in big, sprawling Victorian and Edwardian historical fiction. I love them. After a certain getting used to position, I mean, they're a trifle overwritten and also a trifle lachrymose, a trifle sentimental. But once you get used to those qualities, I love them. They do not disappoint. God is an Englishman was the only one that I found today. I also found this thing. This is an author I've praised on this channel before. This is MMK. I found one of her sumptuous historical romances called Trade Wind. She's best known for the Far Pavilions, and believe me, I looked for it today. I would have taken a $1 mass market of the Far Pavilions. I would even have taken a $4 hardcover of the Far Pavilions if I saw it today. I did not see it. But the book barn, the main building complex, is so sprawling that I could easily have missed it. But I haven't read this in a long time. And it's not just the Far Pavilions that I love. I love the author's register. And talking about loving an author's register, that's going to come up quite a bit here. That is definitely true for these next two books. This is also an author that I dearly love, who, like Taylor Caldwell and like E.R. Delafield, labored for most of his professional career under the burden of having a runaway bestseller. That is a burden. You are forever afterwards associated with that book and seen in light of it. There are plenty of authors working today who could tell you that story. It's a wonderful thing all the way to the bank, but it can frustrate, and it can also cage you. And that was true of a crusty old salt named Nicholas Montserrat. He wrote a book called The Cruel Sea. And The Cruel Sea is brilliant. It is one of the greatest novels about World War II ever written. And not just in the sprawling historical sense of a lot of the others. The Cruel Sea will move you, really move you. But Nicholas Montserrat was really good. He wrote a lot of things that were really, really good. He wrote a novella called HMS Marlborough Will Enter Harbor. He wrote a short story called The Ship That Died of Shame, and a whole bunch of other things. And they're all really, really good. I found two Nicholas Montserrats today, not The Cruel Sea. I found The Capellan of Malta, which is the only other book he wrote other than The Cruel Sea that shares something of its... the word I want to use is dash. He tamped down on the dash in his longer works, he tended to. For instance, he wrote a really big work, he was going to make it even bigger, called Master Mariner, the first part of which was Running Proud, about an eternal a sailor who is immortal. And it's really enjoyable, but it doesn't have that spark that is all through The Cruel Sea. That spark is not all through The Capellan of Malta, but it's there in great pieces. And same thing with this next one. This is a neat pan paperback from across the ocean. This is Three Corvettes. World War II, historical fiction of exactly the type that put him on the map. See, this is what I mean. In every case, their bestseller will just follow them around. I haven't read Three Corvettes in quite some time. Happy to get back to it. And then we have some far more serious stuff. These are things that I have in other formats. I just got them in mass markets because they were right there and they were $1, and I'm building a bookcase here. I like, for instance, these Bantam Classics that I love so much have this thing on the spine. I have a whole shelf of them back at Hyde Cottage, and I found one of the Deerslayer. Not in the best of condition, but one of the only ones I saw today. And this can be reinforced. This can definitely be salvaged and reread. And the other one, a mass market paperback of Anthony Burgess's masterpiece, Earthly Powers, in the old white mass market paperback that used to be everywhere in United States used bookstores. This is an unbelievable book, a classic of late 20th century literature. Burgess's best thing, by far. And yet, again, we have the syndrome of an author who is dogged forever by his runaway bestseller, even though, as in many other cases, the runaway bestseller is not anything like the author's best work. Anthony Burgess knew perfectly well when he was even in his 50s, he knew perfectly well that his name was going to be completely synonymous with A Clockwork Orange. And he was right about that. And in 100 years, if he's remembered at all, if he's taught in schools at all, it will be for A Clockwork Orange. Almost everything that he wrote of any comparable length is better than A Clockwork Orange. And this is downright great. It is an amazing, amazing work. At heart, the story of one friendship between two men, but also the story of what faith is. Because one of those men goes on to be Pope, and the book contains some of the most searching and uncomfortable contemplations of religion that Burgess ever did, and he never stopped thinking about it. So I'm happy to have the mass market paperback. Don't know if how ready I'll be to read the mass market paperback when was it Europa Editions did a beautiful trade paperback that I have back at Hyde Cottage, but for $1, I wasn't gonna sweat it. Then we have a batch of science fiction. I have mentioned on this channel many times that if I ever came across a tranche of great classic old mass market science fiction and fantasy novels, I would grab them because you don't see them anymore. There's an attrition going on with these old mass market paperbacks. No one makes them anymore, and plenty of people snap them up. So the supply is limited, and that's exactly what I found today. At the science fiction building of the Book Barn, I found just wall after wall after wall of mass market science fiction, all for $1 a piece. So I grabbed a lot of them, unashamedly. The first two are the Gondolara cycle. I just recently mentioned Randall Garrett, and these are his big epic fantasy in multiple stories. There's multiple volumes that are in here. But a pair of lovers who are transplanted from Earth to a fantasy land. I haven't read these in forever, and when I read them, they had these covers, these great old period 80s covers. So I'll gladly read them again. It was just wonderful to see them so soon after moaning about Randall Garrett. This next one is David Drake. I love David Drake. He is a great proponent of military science fiction. I've praised his novel Killer, about a Roman beastmaster tasked with capturing a wild animal that is actually an extraterrestrial killer. He wrote also a bunch of other, Vedius and His Friends, Ranks of Bronze, stories about Roman legions transplanted out of their time and sometimes out of their world. Really, really good stuff. Most of his military fiction is really, really good. And this, I have never seen the book with this cover, but I grabbed it right away because I love it. Absolutely love it. It's Dragon Lord. This is David Drake doing King Arthur and Lancelot and Guinevere. The little tagline on the cover of this edition says, "The only Arthur who could have been." And that, I would never put it that way, but that is terrific. That is really, really spot on for what this is. Very, very happy to have it. I don't have but a fraction of David Drake, and I love all of it. Then these next two are an oldie but a goodie. They are very old in the fantasy world. One of these two will never be reprinted. Never. Not in the censorious, puritanical 21st century. Just won't happen. But these are lovely additions with cover art that I just was not familiar with. I must have seen these in bookstores and just blurred them out. The first one is Wisdom's Daughter by H. Rider Haggard. And this is the origin story of Ayesha, she who must be obeyed. This is her origin story, or part of it. In this lovely Del Rey mass market paperback, clearly designed or redesigned to just put it on the shelf next to the fantasy novels that are being written at the time and let it compete. I'd love to know how it competed. It certainly can. And then this next one with a great Darrell K. Sweet cover is People of the Mists. Look at that. That is just beautiful. And this is a strange black dwarf who swam like an otter and fought like a tiger, a bold Englishman whose quest for precious gems brought him a wife he dared not love, a vengeful old woman who knew she could save them or destroy them, and the incredibly beautiful Joanna, who would use all her earthly charms to impersonate a goddess in the land of bloody rituals and hideous terrors. You can tell even from that cover description that no one is ever going to reprint this book. I think I read this about 100 years ago and liked it, but to find it again in a Del Rey science fiction fantasy mass market, fantastic. And then the gays in the audience were probably wondering, they're probably impatiently wondering, I thought you said we were going to get back to Paul Marin and his cheekbones. We are, only it's science fiction. It's urban fantasy. This is by Anton Strout and this is Dead to Me. And there's our boy Paul. This is urban fantasy about a guy who is a psychotelemetrist. He can touch things and learn all about them. Get your mind out of the gutter, you people, okay? He can touch objects and learn all about them, and he's an adventurous, sort of wisecracking guy. I found this is the first book in the series, Dead to Me, but then also I found the second one, Dead Matter. So you get a little bit more of Paul Marin for your admission price, okay? But that's all the Paul Marin there is. Then two volumes in a science fiction trilogy. This drove me nuts, this trilogy, for the longest time. I read them when they came out, which would have been in the early, I'm going to say the early 2000s. 2001, thereabouts. I read the whole trilogy and loved it. I read it in a shot, thought it was fantastic. Then got rid of it, of course, and could not for the life of me remember enough about the author or the title to call it up in a search. So all the time when I've been, every year when I've thought back on science fiction series that I really liked, I've remembered this one and thought, gee, I wish I could find that somehow so that I'd know what I'm talking about. I found two of the volumes. These are by Susan Matthews. The first one is Angel of Destruction. And the second one is The Devil and Deep Space. And there is a third one that I'm just going to have to wait and find. I looked. It wasn't at the Book Barn. These are terrific, though. So very, very... Oh, God, I'm running out of space here. Very, very happy to have them. And then talking about science fiction, one book that I've recommended recently for science fiction is a book by Kirk Mitchell called Proclarator. I found another mass-market paperback. This is set in a world in which Rome never fell. So Rome just continues, and it moves over to North America, and it has long-standing enemies. The emperors still rule, all that sort of stuff. And this is the story of one good man who facing a horrible sort of quasi-supernatural evil, and slowly but surely rising to control of that Roman world. Procurator is fantastic. There is a Roman gunboat, only it's mechanized, making its way through the snowy slopes of North America with troops along the side there. And when I praised this, the last time I praised it on this channel, I think I said how I would love to find the sequels. There were two sequels. And I found the two sequels. I found them today. Cry Republic. These are in perfect condition, like the day they were made. And New Barbarians. These are the two sequels to Procurator. And so now I have, all three of them. For $1 a piece, so you really can't beat that. Then we have another book that I praised on this channel. I'm very fond of it. This author's never written anything else that I liked, but this is an adaptation of Irish mythology. This is A Storm Upon Ulster by Kenneth Flynn. Very 80s cover, and this is the story of Cuchulainn, the cattle raid of Cooley. This is the particular part of the Cuchulainn story where he faces where he holds a pass alone against just an endless sea of enemies, and it's really effective. It is really effective in the original, and Kenneth Flint makes it really effective here. This is a terrific fantasy novel. When I read it back in, I want to say the 1980s. When did this come out? 1981. When all the world made sense. When I read it back then, I thought, well, okay, this is fantastic. It didn't. When I first read it, it didn't have this cover. It had an ugly cover. This is not an ugly cover. But I thought, okay, well, this is a great idea. Adapting the Red Branch cycle for modern fantasy is a great idea. Maybe Kenneth Flint will just do it, and he did. Unfortunately, the life went right out of it after Storm Upon Ulster. But I'm happy to have it. And then the last of the mass markets is an author, again, that I've praised many times on this channel. I found there was a whole bunch of her stuff in the science fiction section. Disappointingly, a lot of it was not in the best shape, so I only got two. And this is James Tiptree, a great science fiction short story writer. And this is Out of the Everywhere and 10,000 Years from Home. Two of the, I believe, 4 or 5 short story collection volumes that came out in the 70s from this author. No matter what stories are in here, these collections will have great things in them. For $1 a piece, I was not going to turn them down. But they did have also a novel of hers that I really like, Up the Walls of the World. But like A Storm Upon Ulster, Up the Walls of the World had 2 mass market covers, one of which was ugly and one of which was lovely. And if the older version, the older mass market copy of A Storm Upon Ulster had been at the Book Barn, I would have turned it down. I wouldn't have gotten it, even for $1. Because I know if it's a mass market, I want the whole deal, and I know the cover that I want. And the cover for Up the Walls of the World that they had there was not the one I wanted, so I just left it behind. And that is all of the mass markets. I could easily have tripled that number. There was so much there, just so much. And Frida was being so good the whole time. She was being so good. She's so friendly to humans, just so friendly. She loves to meet humans. She rounds a corner. I had her on, the leash and harness the whole time. And when she would round a corner, by the time I got around the corner, she would already be jumping up on somebody and wagging her whole body, and they would be saying, "Oh, aren't you cute?" It was very nice. It was very, very nice. But anyway, we're going to move on now to hardcovers and trade paperbacks. And the first one is a classic of American Civil War history that I have had many times. And I'm not 100% sure if our resident doyen of American Civil War history, Bill Rutenberg, has this book. If he doesn't, then I will send him this copy, because I will find another one. This is by Robert Tanner, and it's Stonewall in the Valley. And there is our lunatic in chief right there, Stonewall Jackson. This is a great minute-by-minute, day-by-day story, narrative of his campaign in the Shenandoah Valley, where the Shenandoah Valley is lush and it's beautiful, and it has a mountain range running right down the middle, and right in the middle of that mountain range is something called the Massanutten Gap, where it's possible to move large numbers of troops at speed. And because Jackson knew that arrangement really well, and because he was perfectly willing to lose 1,000 men on a routine march, which is, let's keep in mind, bad generalship. That is very bad generalship. To say nothing of how homicidal it is psychologically, it's also very bad generalship. But he thought nothing of it. And so, for a time, because he knew the terrain really well, he was able to just completely baffle much larger Union armies. And it makes a great story. It is a great narrative. Tanner is very wise to concentrate on that campaign alone in this book. It's really good. If Bill doesn't have it, I will gladly send it to him, because I will find another copy. I do see it regularly, but I had to grab it since these hardcovers and trade paperbacks were dirt cheap. And then this next one led me a merry chase at the Book Barn today. I made a small list. The Book Barn is not the Brattle. If you go to the Brattle sale lot with a list in your head, you won't find anything. You cannot coerce Kismet at the Brattle sale lot. But the Book Barn is just a bookstore. It is a normal bookstore. It's a great bookstore, one of the greatest used book destination spots anywhere in the country. But the rules of Kismet don't apply. So naturally, on the drive down there, I was making a mental list of things that I wanted to look for. You pretty much have to do that. Otherwise, the sheer profusion of the Book Barn will utterly overwhelm you. And I knew that I wanted this next book. So I went to the World War II history section, and I looked for it. And I saw a later trade paperback with different cover artwork. And I thought, okay, well, I want the book. I really don't want this cover art, but I want the book, and I'm not going to be poncy about it if the book is what's important, not the cover art. But then I thought, if you get it, you're only going to be thinking about the cover art that you do want, rather than the cover art that you don't want. So just leave it and wait. The Brattle will provide. And then I was rounding. The section had hundreds and hundreds of titles in it. So I was looking around with a lot more, and came across the big ponderous hardcover of this same book, and thought, okay, well, someone's nudging you to get this. You don't want that trade paperback, maybe the hardcover. At least it won't be fragile. And then I was thinking, no, I want one particular trade paperback. If it's not here, no big deal. The Brattle will eventually provide, although it hadn't in a long time. And then elsewhere at the Book Barn, in the main complex of buildings, there was a big two-sided sort of hand truck cart of new arrivals that were not organized in any way. And I looked at it, of course, it was right there. Frida was perfectly happy to look at it with me. So I looked at it, and there on that cart, totally unsorted, was the version that I want. So I now have a copy of Clay Blair's Silent Victory, his big and definitive history of the U.S. submarine warfare against the Empire of Japan. This is terrific reading. There are some action sequences in here that outdo the best World War II historical fiction. And now I have it in the form that I wanted. I was picky, and it paid off. And then let's see. Oh, well, this next one went without saying. Of course, for $1, I had to get Vermont Beautiful. Since I feel like we've driven over every inch. Of course, we haven't. We've driven over a tiny fraction. But naturally, I want to show this to my host, Mark Richardson, and see how much of this stuff he knows. How many of the places in here he knows. Probably all of them. Then this next one was $1, and it's in a hardcover with one of these plastic library mylar protection things on it, which is always an added benefit, because it means that hang on, it's got a little schmutz on it. It means that it's going to be nice and, you know, durable. I punish my books, and this is going to last a little longer. This is by John Milton Cooper, and is The Pivotal Decades. And this is basically the progressive era, the early 1900s, 1920s, the early 1930s. And William Howard Taft features prominently in these pages. And I had this as a trade paperback once, eons ago, when it came out, or right after it came out. When it was first issued in trade paperback. This came out in 1990. Probably came out in trade paperback in 1993 or 94. Now that's what I got, and the trade paperback did not last with my handling. This will last. It's nice and protected. And then this thing here was, again, dirt cheap. I think this was $4. This is by James Norman Hall. This is My Island Home. James Norman Hall is one half of Nordhoff and Hall, the authors of the Mutiny on the Bounty. And he wrote a lot of other things too, and he was born in Iowa, and eventually ended up all over the world, and synonymous with exotic travel. This was in the nautical section. I've never read this book. I've heard about it, but I've never read it. And so I got it for a song and grabbed it. Then this next one, we'll finish up with these biographies. This next one is a big biography. It's a trade paperback. I once had this in hardcover. It's a lovely thing, and I believe definitive on the subject. I got a big hardcover. I'm pretty sure I sent it to one of you that just loves this person more than I do. I perfectly admit I'm not, you know, the biggest lover of William Blake's poetry or his illustrations at all. I think he's important and valuable, and occasionally he wrote something that I like. But this is by G.E. Bentley, and it's A Stranger from Paradise. And I've read a lot of Blake biographies. This is by far the best one that I've ever read. So I was very happy to find a copy of it in perfect condition in a trade paperback for a song, especially since I look at my biography section back at Hyde Cottage, and I think, well, okay, what you're aiming at here is to have the very best biography of the figures in this section for whom you are only going to have one volume. If you think the figure is particularly interesting, then I'll have as many volumes as the Brattle can provide with me. But if I like them but I don't love them, then one biography is usually good enough. And there isn't a time when I look at that biography section when I don't think, well, yeah, someday another hardcover copy of Stranger from Paradise will show up. Well, the trade paperback's good enough. And then we'll finish up with this one, a beautiful thing. I believe this is a UK hardcover. This is by D.J. Taylor, and it's a biography of William Makepeace Thackeray, the author of Vanity Fair. There were many, many copies of Vanity Fair at the Book Barn. It was pleasing to see. I don't know that I have read this, unless this is the same book. I'll have to check. Unless they changed the title for the American edition. I seem to recall there was a Thackeray biography called The Prince of Players or something like that I really liked. If this changed to that when it came over to America, then I have read this before. If not, then I haven't. Either way, it's win-win. So I'll take it. I'll absolutely take it. Because Thackeray led a great life. It was absolutely fascinating. A prickly, extremely doctrinaire, but very lovable authorly figure. A really good writer's life to study. And large chunks of his writing life have nothing to do with Vanity Fair, are very interesting. There are lots of stories connected with Thackeray's life that are very interesting. So glad to have it. Absolutely glad to have it. And there you go. I don't know how many books that was, but that was my book haul from the Book Barn in Niantic, Connecticut, where I have not been in 10 years. And this is the first time that I've ever brought a dog there. This is not the first time I brought dogs to Connecticut in order to house them nearby and go to the Book Barn without them, then come back and collect them. But this is the first time that I brought a dog to the shop and just walked around with her. And it was tremendously freeing. It was a tremendously freeing experience. The only drawback was that it was the hottest day of the year. It was nearly 100 degrees Fahrenheit, and Frida does not handle the heat well. So the whole time I was worried that she was going to overheat, but she took it like a trooper. She was as happy as could be to see all these new things, to meet all these new people. She even met some goats. I have a picture. I'll post it on Instagram. And that is it. Between me and Mark, we filled the entire back seat of the car with books. And who knows when I will go back to the Book Barn. So it was very much my intention, if the trip went off without a hitch, to load up, and that's exactly what I did. So I'm going to wrap this up. There's not going to be any mail hauls today. No Library Tour of Doom. You're going to have to go without the Library Tour of Doom, or the tags, or the mail, or the library or the mail hauls, or your 4 fried chickens, or your dry white toast, and without Matt Guitar Murphy. This is going to have to do for today. And I'll be back tomorrow. Thank you, BookTube.